The last time April Campbell heard her daughter's voice, Danielle was trying to get her newborn baby out of the car. It was around 7:30 in the evening on February 1st, 2022. April had called to check in, the way mothers do, the way mothers always do when their daughters are out at night with a 2-day-old infant who had just come home from the hospital and needed more testing. And Danielle answered. She said, "Yeah, Mom, I'm trying to get the baby out of the car and get her in the hospital." She sounded like herself. She sounded like a 27-year-old woman doing exactly what she had said she was doing, taking care of her newborn daughter, navigating the ordinary exhaustion of new motherhood, handling it. That was the last thing April heard. The phone went quiet, and the next time she received any information about where her daughter was, it came from a police officer standing at a car in Whitehaven with a broken driver's side window, telling her that a woman had been found outside that vehicle with a gunshot wound to the head. Danielle Hoyle was 27 years old. She had just given birth 2 days earlier. Her newborn daughter, Kennedy, was 2 days old, and neither of them came home that night. Welcome to Behind the Evidence. This is where we go past the headline and into everything the headline never had room to tell. The full story, the psychology, the evidence, the people. If you are new here, subscribe now because we cover cases like this every single week, and this one, the case of Danielle and Kennedy Hoyle, is one of the most devastating and one of the most important stories this channel has ever told. Stay with me. Now let's go back to the beginning. Danielle Hoyle was from Memphis, Tennessee. She was a mother first and foremost, and that identity was central to everything her family described about who she was. She had a 10-year-old daughter at home when she gave birth to Kennedy. She was the kind of woman who, by every account from the people who loved her, showed up for her children the way that good mothers show up, completely, without reservation, with everything she had. She was young, 27 years old, and she had just been through one of the most physically and emotionally demanding experiences a human body can endure. And she was doing it while also caring for a 10-year-old and navigating a relationship with the father of her newborn that, based on what the evidence eventually revealed, was far more complicated and far more dangerous than anyone outside that relationship fully understood. Kennedy Hoyle was born on January 30th, 2022. She weighed 6 pounds. She was 17 inches long. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a black and white polka dot onesie with pink pants. She was 2 days old. She had been alive for 45 hours when her father made the decision that ended both of their lives. Brandon Isabelle was 25 years old. He was the father of Kennedy Hoyle. He and Danielle had a relationship that produced a child, and by the time that child arrived in the world, the relationship had reached a point where Isabelle had already, according to the evidence prosecutors would later present at trial, made a decision about what he intended to do. His phone search history, which investigators recovered and prosecutors presented to the jury, showed that he had been researching the area near the crime scene before the night of February 1st. His GPS data placed him at that location earlier in the day. He had not simply arrived in a moment of escalating conflict and made a terrible, impulsive choice. He had planned where he was going to take her. He had chosen the location. And then he had made a phone call or sent a message that brought Danielle to him. This is what investigators mean when they use the word luring. Not a casual invitation, not a request to talk, a deliberate, calculated communication designed to bring a specific person to a specific place at a specific time for a purpose that person did not know and could not have anticipated. Danielle Hoyle left her mother's home in Whitehaven at around 6 p.m. on February 1st. She had her 2-day-old daughter with her. She was, as far as April Campbell understood, on her way to a hospital appointment for Kennedy's newborn testing. Whether that appointment was real, whether Isabelle had constructed or redirected it to serve his plan, is part of what the investigation and trial unpacked. What is clear is that Danielle ended up in the area of East Levi Road and Sedgwick Street in Whitehaven, and that is where Brandon Isabelle was waiting. At approximately 11, 15 p.m. that Tuesday night, a Memphis Police Department officer was in the area of Sedgwick Drive and Levi Road on an unrelated matter, looking for possibly stolen vehicles. The officer spotted a tan Chevrolet Cruze. The driver's side window was broken. The officer ran the license plate. The vehicle belonged to Danielle Hoyle. Officers contacted her family. The family said they had not heard from her since she had left the house with the baby hours earlier. And while officers were still on the phone with the family, making that initial contact, another officer found a woman lying outside the car, off the road. She had been shot in the head. She was identified as Danielle Hoyle. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Kennedy was not in the car. Kennedy was not anywhere near the car. The 2-day-old infant, 6 pounds, 17 inches long, black and white polka dot onesie, pink pants was gone. Memphis police immediately began searching. A city watch was issued. By Wednesday morning, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation had issued a full Amber Alert for Kennedy Hoyle, 2 days old, last seen with her mother. Police descended on the area. Officers searched along the Mississippi River near the 800 block of Island Drive on Mud Island. The community held its breath. April Campbell stood in front of cameras and said what every grandmother in that situation says when the people around her are telling her to wait. She said they had like 50 police looking for her. And then she said the thing that cuts right through all the procedural language and all the careful official statements. She said her thing was that everybody should be looking for her. She said she was a newborn. Brandon Isabelle was identified as a person of interest quickly. He was the father of the missing child. He was known to the family. He was known to investigators as someone connected to both victims. He was detained on Wednesday afternoon, February 2nd, while the search for Kennedy was still ongoing. And then he waived his right to an attorney. He sat across from Memphis police investigators and he talked. What Brandon Isabelle told those investigators is now part of the formal record of one of the most disturbing criminal cases in the recent history of Memphis. He admitted to luring Danielle Hoyle to the area of Levi and Sedgwick. He admitted to shooting her. He told investigators what he had done with Kennedy. He said he had taken the baby from Danielle's car. He had driven to Island Park and the Upper Mud Island boat ramp, where the Wolf River meets the Mississippi River, and he had thrown his 2-day-old daughter into the water. He then threw the gun he had used to shoot Danielle into the river as well. Kennedy Hoyle's remains have never been recovered. At 4:23 p.m. on Wednesday, February 2nd, Memphis police located Kennedy's car seat abandoned near a Walmart dumpster in Whitehaven. Danielle's family confirmed the car seat belonged to Kennedy. That car seat, found discarded behind a retail store, became one of the most viscerally painful images associated with this case. A newborn's car seat, thrown away. The physical evidence of a life that had barely begun, discarded in the same deliberate, methodical way that everything else had been discarded that night. At 7 p.m. on Wednesday, Memphis police announced the charges. Brandon Isabelle was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of murder in the perpetration of aggravated kidnapping, especially aggravated kidnapping, and tampering with or fabricating evidence. He was charged with the deaths of both Danielle Hoyle and Kennedy Hoyle. Police stated clearly that while Kennedy's body had not been located, the evidence strongly indicated she was deceased. The search would continue for her remains. Isabelle appeared in court on February 7, 2022, and pleaded not guilty. His attorney at the time, Lauren Futch, indicated that her office was looking into whether police had coerced Isabelle's admission during interrogation. That legal argument, the suggestion that the confession was not voluntarily given, would become part of the defense strategy as the case moved toward trial. It would not ultimately be enough. For 3.5 years, the case moved through the Tennessee court system. 3.5 years, during which April Campbell said she had not slept. 3.5 years during which Danielle's 10-year-old daughter grew into a teenager, carrying the weight of what she had lost without having chosen to carry it. 3.5 years during which Kennedy Hoyle remained in the Mississippi River, never found, forever 2 days old. The trial of Brandon Isabelle began in September 2025. It lasted nearly 2 weeks. Prosecutors called more than 30 witnesses to the stand. The evidence presented to the jury was comprehensive, layered, and in several moments, almost impossible to process in the context of a courtroom that was designed for procedural order and measured legal language. One of the most significant pieces of evidence presented by prosecutors was Brandon Isabelle's own confession, played in its entirety for the jury. Sergeant Jacoba Boyd of the Memphis Police Department testified that, during the interrogation, Isabelle had admitted to fatally shooting Danielle Hoyle in the head and then taking Kennedy to the river. She described what the culmination of that interview had produced. She said the ultimate ending was that he shot Danielle multiple times, pulled her from the vehicle, and then advised that he took the baby to his house and then eventually to the river. The confession also contained, in a detail that investigators noted with particular care, a shift in Isabelle's account of exactly what had happened at the riverbank. His initial statement said he had placed Kennedy on the bank. Later in the same interrogation, he admitted he had thrown her by the leg into the Wolf River. Prosecutors also presented phone data. Isabelle's search history, pulled from his device, showed research conducted before the night of February 1st related to the area near the crime scene. His GPS location data placed him in that area earlier in the day. That digital trail is what allowed prosecutors to stand before the jury and argue premeditation with a specific and concrete foundation. This was not a man who had arrived at a terrible decision in the heat of a moment he hadn't anticipated. This was a man whose phone showed he had thought about it before he did it. Physical evidence collected at the scene included gunshot residue found on Isabelle's pants and confirmation through forensic analysis that the blood found on his slides matched Danielle Hoyle's DNA. The defense presented its own case. Isabelle's defense team called a witness from a firm that had worked with FedEx, where Isabelle had been employed, to testify about his professional record. He had received an Employee of the Year award in 2020. He had a Purple Passion Award Certificate of Excellence. A glowing performance review was read to the court. The defense also noted that aside from traffic violations, Isabelle had no prior criminal record, and that he had completed electrician and plumbing courses while in jail during the years the case awaited trial. The argument the defense was building was one of mitigation, an attempt to present the jury with a picture of a man who had, before this, been functional and even successful, as a reason to spare him the most severe possible sentencing outcome. The prosecution's response to that argument was direct. The prosecutor said simply, "Great job being Employee of the Year 2 years before you did this," and then stated clearly that none of those things took away from the severity of what he had done. The defense also raised the context of Isabelle's relationship with another woman, identified as Artesha Stewart. Attorneys argued that at the time of the murders, Isabelle was in a tumultuous relationship with Stewart, and that the circumstances surrounding that relationship were relevant to understanding his state of mind. What that argument could not address, and what prosecutors did not allow the jury to lose sight of, was the detail that emerged about what Brandon Isabelle did in the hours after he shot Danielle Hoyle and disposed of Kennedy. He went to Walgreens. He bought gifts for Artesha Stewart. 2 days after Danielle gave birth, hours after shooting her in the head, hours after leaving his 2-day-old daughter in the Wolf River, Brandon Isabelle went to a retail pharmacy and bought presents for the other woman in his life. That detail is not simply a piece of evidence. It is a psychological portrait. It tells the jury and it tells everyone who hears this case something specific about the internal experience of the man who committed these acts. He did not collapse under the weight of what he had done. He did not sit in paralysis or grief or fear. He drove to a store. He walked the aisles. He selected items. He purchased them. The cognitive and emotional state required to do that in the hours after what he had just done is something that no character witness testimony about workplace achievement can soften or explain. Brandon Isabelle did not testify during the guilt phase of his trial. He exercised his right to remain silent while the prosecution presented its case, but he did speak during the sentencing phase. On September 30th, 2025, the jury returned its verdict. Brandon Isabelle was found guilty on all 5 counts: first-degree murder of Danielle Hoyle, first-degree murder of Kennedy Hoyle, aggravated child abuse, aggravated child neglect, especially aggravated kidnapping, every single count, unanimously. After nearly 2 weeks of testimony, 30 witnesses, and 3.5 years of waiting, the jury delivered its answer without equivocation. April Campbell had not slept well in 3 years. The night the verdict came in, she slept. The sentencing phase that followed was its own chapter, one that requires its own space to be understood properly. The jury deliberated for nearly 3 hours before deciding on Isabelle's sentence for Danielle's murder. They chose life in prison with the possibility of parole after 51 years rather than life without parole. That decision was controversial. It is the kind of outcome that leaves families with complicated feelings. The acknowledgement that parole eligibility exists even when the nature of the crime makes release a moral impossibility for many people to contemplate. Isabelle received an automatic life sentence for Kennedy's murder as well. Then came the sentencing hearing on November 12, 2025, for the remaining charges. And that is where Judge Carlin Addison said something to the court that stopped everyone in that room. She sentenced Isabelle to 22.5 years for aggravated child abuse and 22.5 years for especially aggravated kidnapping, to run consecutively with the life sentences already imposed. And she explained why she had chosen that specific number. She said counts 4 and 5, 45 years. A year for every hour that we had Kennedy. Kennedy Hoyle was alive for approximately 45 hours. 45 hours of a black and white polka dot onesie and pink pants, and 6 pounds of new life in brown hair and brown eyes, and a grandmother who called her the sweetest thing ever for the 1 hour she got to hold her. Brandon Isabelle received 1 additional year of prison time for every one of those hours. The total sentence came to 147 years. The Shelby County District Attorney's Office stated after the sentencing, Chief Prosecutor Eric Christensen said that Danielle and Kennedy deserved protection, love, and life. He said the outcome reflected the heinous nature of the crimes perpetrated against 2 cherished members of their community. During the sentencing proceedings, a victim impact letter written by Danielle's sister was read to the court. She wrote that the happiest day of her life had turned into the worst day of her life. She wrote directly to Brandon Isabelle. She told him that if he had not wanted Danielle, he should have stayed away. She said Danielle was going to be loved regardless. April Campbell took the stand. She described what it had felt like to lose both her daughter and her granddaughter at the same time. She talked about Kennedy, about what those 45 hours had meant, about being the 7th grandchild and being taken just like that. She talked about Danielle's oldest daughter, the 10-year-old who is now a teenager, who cries every day. When April tried to bring her to court to speak, she told her grandmother she was too scared to be in the same room as Isabelle. And then April looked at Isabelle and she said what she had come to say. She said simply, "I just hate you did it." She said she wished he had just stayed gone. She said so many men were absent from their children's lives, who chose not to be present, who chose not to be responsible. She said he could have been one of them. He could have just not been there. And Danielle and Kennedy would still be alive. Instead, he chose to be present in the worst possible way, to insert himself into their lives at the most vulnerable moment imaginable and take everything. Brandon Isabelle took the stand during sentencing. He said that the things he went through every day ate him up inside. He said the proceedings hurt. He said he understood what he had done and took full ownership. He said he prayed that he would make better decisions for himself and those around him moving forward. Judge Addison addressed the courtroom before delivering her sentence. She said the world is darker because Danielle and Kennedy Hoyle are not here. She said there are no words she could use to make sense of what happened. No words to bring them back. And then she sentenced Brandon Isabelle to 147 years in prison, with the 2 life sentences to run consecutively, followed by the additional 45 years. He will be eligible for parole consideration in 51 years at the absolute earliest. He is 28 years old today. He will be 79 years old before that window opens, if it ever opens. A parole board will decide at that point about whether someone who lured the mother of his child to a deserted area, shot her in the head, disposed of his 2-day-old daughter in a river, went to Walgreens, and then pleaded not guilty for 3.5 years deserves to walk free. The weight of that determination, whenever it comes, will fall on a parole board whose members have not yet been chosen, in a world that will look nothing like the one that existed on February 1st, 2022. Kennedy Hoyle has never been found. The Mississippi River did not give her back. The search that Memphis police conducted in the days following her disappearance, along Mud Island, along the Wolf River Delta, did not recover her. She remains in that river, 2 days old, forever. And the family that loved her has had to find a way to grieve someone whose physical absence from the world was never made concrete in the way that a burial makes grief concrete. There is no grave for Kennedy Hoyle. There is a car seat found near a Walmart dumpster. There is an Amber Alert that became a murder investigation. There is a grandmother who calls her the 7th grandchild and says she was taken just like that. And there is a 147-year sentence that a judge constructed around the length of Kennedy's life because no other number felt adequate. There are things about this case that the legal outcome cannot fully address. The question of what Brandon Isabelle believed he was solving by killing Danielle and disposing of Kennedy. Whether the tumultuous relationship with Artesha Stewart, the competing demands of 2 relationships, and a newborn, produced in him the conclusion that the most efficient resolution was to eliminate the people most inconvenient to the life he wanted. Whether he experienced any genuine recognition of what he had done in the hours at Walgreens buying gifts, in the days before his arrest, in the 3.5 years of pretrial proceedings during which he maintained a not guilty plea, while his own recorded confession was sitting in an evidence file. Whether the apology he offered from the stand during sentencing reached anything real inside him, or was the performance of accountability rather than its substance. These questions do not have answers available in the public record. What is available is this. A 27-year-old woman left her mother's house with her 2-day-old daughter to go to a hospital appointment. She called her mother from the parking lot. She said she was trying to get the baby out of the car. And then she was lured to a street in Whitehaven by the father of her child, and she was shot, and Kennedy was taken to a river, and April Campbell did not sleep for 3.5 years. Danielle Hoyle deserved to watch Kennedy grow up. She deserved to be in the room when her 10-year-old became a teenager and then a young adult. She deserved to be exhausted and joyful and overwhelmed and present in the messy, irreplaceable way that new mothers are present in the lives of their newborns. She deserved to get old. She was 27 years old. She deserved decades more. Kennedy Hoyle deserved to outgrow the polka dot onesie. She deserved to be too big for the car seat that was found by a dumpster. She deserved to be number 7, her grandmother's 7th grandchild, growing up surrounded by the family that was already waiting to love her. She deserved to drive her mother and her grandmother crazy in the best possible way. That is exactly what the prosecutor said to the jury. Kennedy Hoyle should be 3 years old. She should be growing, learning, getting into things. She should be too big for that car seat, but she is forever frozen in time, not even 2 days old. Brandon Isabelle is serving 147 years in a Tennessee correctional facility. The judge built that sentence around the life of his daughter, around the 45 hours that Kennedy was here. 45 hours, 1 year per hour. That is what the court decided Kennedy's life was worth in the language of criminal sentencing. And while no sentence, no number, no legal proceeding can assign actual value to a life that was taken before it had the chance to become anything, that sentence is the clearest statement the system is capable of making about what happened to Danielle and Kennedy Hoyle on February 1st, 2022. The world is darker. The judge said it. The evidence proves it. And the only thing this channel can do, and the only thing you can do by watching and sharing this video, is make sure that Danielle and Kennedy Hoyle are not forgotten, that their names are spoken, that the case that took 3.5 years to resolve is not allowed to disappear into the archive. Say their names: Danielle Hoyle, Kennedy Hoyle, 2 days old forever. If you or someone you know is in a relationship that feels unsafe or unpredictable in ways that are hard to explain to the people around you, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Free, confidential, available 24 hours a day by call, text, and chat at the hotline. Org. Trust what you feel. Tell someone. And please know that the warning signs are real, even when they are quiet. Subscribe to Behind the Evidence. Share this video for Danielle. Share it for Kennedy. Share it for April Campbell, who finally slept the night the verdict came in.